our guests stay, as mentioned, we turn to the other big case here that's also in Trump's orbit, Rudy Giuliani, dealing with the feds going through those phones and computers. Only he and maybe his client Donald Trump know what's on there. Giuliani back at it. He is doing what is becoming a kind of Baroque theater of radio show defense, talking about this case.
I don't know why they're searching my house. I have no idea what they allege I supposedly did, acted as an agent for some Ukrainian. It's just totally untrue. I don't know what they base it on, either their own supposition or some liar. But I can prove that I wasn't. I've offered to come there and prove it.
Giuliani there is basically saying that he doesn't see himself as a foreign agent. That's one of the issues at the case. Now, they're also discussing whether he would go in and talk. He reportedly, though, had conditions attached that he didn't mention on the radio, that he would only show up if given topics ahead of time. U.S. attorney and their investigators said no. Giuliani also going after the feds for how they raided his law office.
Instead, they wanted to break into my house and, worst of all, break into my law office, for which they should be really penalized. I mean, the thing should be suppressed. You should not be allowed to break into a lawyer's office on a charge of one alleged failure to file as a foreign agent.
Danya, as I reminded viewers, you worked in the same office he used to run, the Southern District. I will say, as a student of the Rudy Giuliani public defense, I didn't know that my life would bring me to this role, but I have been studying him now for some me as more rational, more rooted in the actual legal fact pattern than a bunch of the other baloney he said. And so I'm happy to get some actual legal content for you to analyze. What do you think of the contention there? That he says if you're only accused of what he views, in his opinion, as a smaller felony, and one could make the argument that obviously the foreign lobbying violation is different than more serious felonies like murder or something very serious. His view is if it's a small felony, maybe you don't have to be searched at all. Is that legally sound?
That's not legally sound. The prosecutors, as long as they have probable cause for a federal offense and can get a judge to sign off on it, in this case as well to get senior DOJ officials to sign off on it, they can get a search warrant. Doesn't matter if it's for a fair offense or for premeditated murder. In point of fact, though, as a practical matter, it may be the case that for a simple technical paperwork violation, they would not go to these lengths. So, but he's wrong as a matter of law. He may have other legal defenses, including, whether or not there was in fact probable cause, whether or not an agent testified, improperly in getting the search warrant sworn out. Those may all be legal defenses. But yes, some of the defenses we've seen, the line prosecutors are jealous, or he's being framed, or the whataboutism with Hunter Biden. Neither of these, I don't know about you, Ari, but he also does not seem to be a student of either history or the law, because those are, of course, not real legal defenses.
Yeah, and that seems to be a problem for him, where it's coming out of his emotion. And again, in maximum fairness, he may be speaking more as a frustrated subject of a probe, not as a lawyer. There's a reason why lawyers sometimes need lawyers, because you can't really lawyer for yourself. So his passion's coming through. He has every right to mount his defense. Some of what he's saying doesn't wash. It's not legally sound. You mentioned history, which brings me to the thing I wanted to put to Juanita on the political side. There are all sorts of cases one could draw on to say that perhaps one is on the wrong end of an investigation. I would say Richard Nixon in the popular imagination would be one of the last you would go for as the only person driven from the White House under forcible legal and congressional pressure. And yet, here we have it. Juanita, take a look.
I'm not a crook. I've never been a crook. And I know everybody says it, but I didn't do it, and these people are framing me. And they're framing me because, very simple reason, I got the goods on Joe Biden.
People have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Juanita, we often turn to you on political communication. Where do you rate this political strategy of consciously or subconsciously aligning himself with one of Richard Nixon's most ignominious statements ever?
I believe he did it consciously, and it's still asinine, Ari. Like, we all know how it turned out for Richard Nixon, but he doesn't see himself as going that same path. it's striking to me that he would invoke Nixon's words saying, I'm not a crook, when the record show, it's likely to show that when feds start to probe through all of the evidence that they took, that there is going to be some potential audio, some communication of him committing crimes. And so it's just really striking to me that he decided to choose that route. I'm not surprised that it was immediately followed by other ridiculous statements, because I feel like Giuliani is fully in a scramble mode right now. And I don't know if this is a plea for help to Trump that's coded like, hey, come save me, come help me, which we know Trump hasn't been there for him at all. But as we know that his attorneys are likely to file motions to prevent investigators from reviewing all of that information, I'm going to be keeping an eye on for whether or not Trump signs on to those motions, because that could be seen as some self-preservation on the part of Trump, but also a glimmer of support for Giuliani, which we know he has not gotten any of to date.
You make a great point that's both the legal and the political, and whether this is one of the people in the Trump orbit that's going to be discarded, like Michael Cohen, who was, of course, the previous lawyer, or whether there may be a bear hug. I mean, Steve Bannon and Donald Trump had a bigger falling out than Giuliani, and in the end, he did get the support. So it is, again, one of these parlor tricks that we'll have to follow.